For our mods project, we chose the J. Paul Getty Museum. The J. Paul Getty Museum at the Getty Center in Los Angeles houses paintings, drawings, sculpture, and illuminated manuscripts collected from around the world. As a museum and educational center dedicated to the study of art and culture, the Getty serves a varied audience through exhibitions, conservation, scholarship, research, and public programs. With over 44,000 works of art from the museum's extensive collection of art and antiquities, approximately 1,200 are on view. The Getty catalogs their collections with a structured terminology for art, architecture, decorative arts, and other material culture, as well as archival materials, visual images, and bibliographic materials. Compliant with international standards, the Getty provides authoritative information for catalogers and researchers, and their information can be used to enhance access to databases and websites. For this project, we challenged ourselves by applying the MODS metadata framework to an eclectic collection of items held at the museum. We each independently chose 5 items that would fall within the category of mythological creatures, and the diversity of examples ranged from a page within a manuscript to a faucet handle. With such a diverse range of objects, we felt MODS would be a good framework for this collection due to the fact that MODS is compatible with resource descriptions and allows other formats like Dublin Core or other created local terms to be mapped to MODS for more comprehensive descriptions. The Getty does not have a standard structure for their collection, as you can tell as we move through these slides, although each object tries to present much of the same information. Thus, we thought the Getty would be a great source for our application profile. As we were working to figure out what elements we needed, we realized that within our collection, there were discrepancies, even between different objects. Moreover, other objects from other collections also displayed a wide variety in terms of not only content, but layout and design. Thus, it would be conceivable to extend our application to every item in every collection at the Getty. Essentially, we could develop this into a museum standard based on MODS and rooted in Dublin Core. As we were designing our schema and discussing the elements, we also considered user needs, noting who is the audience for the Getty, what are they looking for, and how are they going to access the information. The Getty attracts a diverse set of users. That includes Getty Museum staff, researchers, and art historians, as well as members of the public interested in learning more about an object displayed at the museum as a permanent fixture or as part of a collection on tour. From this diverse user base, we realized that information such as artist or maker, date, museum, department, and title in the collection versus display title can often be misleading. So, with this brief description of our collection and users in mind, let's move the discussion to our application profile. Our goal was to create a schema that allowed us to inform a diverse set of users with important descriptive information.
All right, let's take a look at the application profile that Group 3 built for the Getty Mythical Creatures collection. We imported the mod schema that our group has created, as well as our local term schema, which has also been incorporated within our mod schema for the terms that are involved with that. Our mythology collection is composed of mythology records, and these are made up of the following container groups displayed over here. Next, we're going to go through these in more detail. The mod's title info container and its selected terms mostly fit with the Getty collection. However, we needed to add one attribute. This was the UW title display attribute, which had the following list of enumerations: published title, group title, and display title. These came up when we were working with the Getty collection, so we decided to incorporate that into our local terms. The mod's location container was a particularly interesting one that we made a few changes to with local terms to fit the Getty's needs. For the element physical location, we've added an attribute called UW current location. The Getty Institute is unique in that it has multiple locations where artifacts are held, including the Getty Center, which is in Los Angeles, and the Getty Villa, which is located relatively close in Malibu. To tailor our application profile to their needs, the museum really needs to keep track of which location its artifacts are at to minimize confusion with its users. We created a attribute of current location, which is enumerated through a simple type with different enumerations, like it's on display at the Getty Center, the Getty Villa, or it's not on view, another piece of information that would be helpful for our user groups. An interesting point to make is our user groups vary in that some are internal staff of the Getty Institute, or they're external partners, such as the public or researchers working at different institutions. Because of this, not on view might be something that needs to be modified or changed, different displays, depending on if it's being viewed by an internal collections management database or online through a research portal. For sublocation, we created UW department, which is an attribute with a simple child type, UW department list, which includes an enumerated list of departments with mythical creature artifacts, including antiques, manuscripts, photographs, sculpture, and decorative arts. If this framework were to be expanded beyond the mythical creatures collection to the entire Getty institution, the department enumerations would need to be expanded to reflect all the different departments within the museum. For URL, I want to note that we opted for its cardinality to make it 0 and unbounded. This is because there are two different portals within the Getty website for accessing the collections with two different URLs for a particular artifact. Additionally, artifacts might be used on different collection websites. Maybe it's been featured in an exhibition. It might be nice to associate those URLs with the record. We decided to keep the URL optional to make it non-mandatory for artifacts either being held by the Getty or in the collection that might not be able to be put on the website. So for example, if an object has been on loan from another institution and they don't want to put it on the website, it can still be within the Getty's collections management system and not have a filler URL, keeping the data clean. For exhibition history, we created this local term because there didn't seem to be one in mods that really fit the Getty's needs. Exhibition history is theoretically a series of location changes. It moved from this room in the museum to this room in the museum to another exhibition at another institution. So we felt that it made sense within this section of mods. Within the container of mods name, we created a local term called artist. We decided to make its cardinality from 1 to unbounded because there may be multiple artists working on a piece, and also while a lot of the items within the mythical creatures collection, they were pre-modern artifacts or objects, and because of this oftentimes the artist is not known. We didn't just want to have a blank field, we want to have something, a placeholder like unknown, fill this role. Another interesting part of this is role. While we didn't do an enumerated list for roles for the purpose of this project, we think it would be really interesting if this could be expanded through enumeration for the Getty collection, perhaps with talking about the role that the artist played. Was it a painter? Were they an illuminator of illuminated manuscripts? Were they a choreographer? This could really add some depth to the collection's description. For origin info, one thing I want to touch on is dates. There are lots of different dates involved in this part of our schema. We define the types of these elements as strings as opposed to a date type for several reasons. One of them is that the different cultures that created these artifacts may have different date schemes, and it would be difficult to map that to, our standard modern Gregorian date calendar. This is also especially important because many of the dates included in relation to these pre-modern objects are not exact. They might be an estimate from a curator, or they might include BC or CE. They may have a date range like 300 BC to 200 BC. So again, string was the best type for these items. In regards to cardinality, we decided to keep the UW culture local term, something that we created in relation to the needs of the Getty, from 1 to unbounded, because many of these artifacts had multiple cultures listed in the records. We wanted to make sure that those could be included in their description metadata. For identifier, many of these objects had many different number schemes applied by the Getty collection. For example, they might have had a manuscript number, an inventory number. If they were part of the Fleischmann collection, they had a Fleischmann collection number, or even a previous number if they were from a different institution or a different numbering scheme at the Getty. Because of this, we decided to make our identifier number a string to accommodate these different number schemes, as well as add an attribute called UW identifier type. Make this local term, which is enumerated by the different number schemes we noticed in the 20 artifacts we looked at. Obviously, this isn't comprehensive in considering the many different collections at the Getty, and so these enumerations would need to be expanded if this metadata schema were to be put into action. For abstract, we kept mods pretty much the way it was. We decided to use that for the description, often a paragraph that was included in the metadata for artifacts. We kept it a string to accommodate that needs. We also made it optional since many of the artifacts didn't have a description. Maybe they hadn't had a write-up done by a curator. For physical description, we mapped form to the Getty's use of medium, describing what an object is made out of, and extent to dimensions, so talking about the different the size of the object. We decided to use digital origin as optional because none of our objects are digital, although this may be relevant in the future or for different collections at the Getty. The single element that we created in our local terms that did not fit easily into one of the containers within mods was the item provenance. So provenance is a concept in museums, or antiques I suppose, that talks about the history of the object itself. Who owned it? How has it changed between hands throughout its history? Related to that is also the credit line. So if an item was donated to the museum by a family that had owned it, um, that item of the provenance would be related because their name would be in the credit line if they requested that. All of these items are from 0 to unbounded since the item's provenance may be unknown. Likewise, there might not be a credit line or a detailed provenance history. We decided to use the type as string because it would be able to hold as much or as little information that was available. We also created the container UW Getty classification, which contained two child elements, UW classification type and UW object type. These are related to how the Getty describes its objects through nomenclature. So for example, the classification type is more broad, so it talks about things like sculpture or manuscripts or pieces of architecture or vessels, whereas the object type really narrows in on what the thing actually is. Broadly speaking, an artifact might be a vessel. However, when you look at it narrower as what the object actually is, it could be a cup. Likewise, a manuscript might contain both a folio and an attachment. We created these enumerations based off of the 20 artifacts that we looked at for this project and the ones that we mapped out in our instance. However, if this framework were to be applied to the entire Getty collection, clearly these would have to be expanded, possibly using whatever nomenclature scheme they use when they're defining their objects.
And this concludes Group 3's application profile of the Getty Museum. Thank you.